The 10th lesson of a series of lessons in Raja Yoga. Recording by Arabella Grayson. A series of lessons in Raja Yoga by Yogi Ramacharaka. The 10th lesson, Part 1. Subconsciousing. In the 9th lesson, we called your attention to the fact that reasoning was not necessarily conscious in its operations, and that, in fact, a large part of the rational processes of the mind are performed below or above the field of consciousness. And in the 8th lesson, we gave you a number of examples illustrating this fact. We also gave you a number of cases in which the subconscious field of the intellect worked out problems and then after a time passed on to the conscious field of the intellect the solution of the matter. In this lesson, we purpose instructing you in the methods by which this part of the intellect may be set to work for you. Many have stumbled upon bits of this truth for themselves, and in fact, the majority of successful men and women who have attained eminence in any walk of life have made more or less use of this truth, although they seldom understand the reason of it. Very few Western writers have recognized the work of this plane of the mind. They have given us full and ingenious theories and examples of the workings of the instinctive mind, and in some cases they have touched upon the workings and operations of the intuitional planes, but in nearly every case they have treated the intellect as something entirely confined to the conscious plane of mentation. In this they have missed some of the most interesting and valuable manifestations of subconscious mentation. In this lesson, we will take up this particular phase of mentation and trust to be able to point out the way to use it to the best advantage, giving some simple instructions that have been given by the Hindu teachers to their students for centuries past, such instructions, of course, being modified by us to conform to the requirements and necessities of the Western student of today. We have taken the liberty of bestowing a new title upon this phase of mentation. We have thought it well to call it subconsciousing. The word sub, of course, means under, below, and the word consciousing is a favorite term employed by Professor Elmer Gates and means receiving impressions from the mind. In a general way, subconsciousing, as used in this lesson, may be understood to mean using the subconscious mind under orders of the conscious mind. By referring to our 8th lesson, we see mention made of the case of the man who indulged in unconscious rumination, which happened to him when he read books presenting new points of view essentially opposed to his previous opinion. You will note that after days, weeks, or months, he found that to his great astonishment, the old opinions were entirely rearranged, and new ones lodged there. On the same page, you will see mentioned the case of Sir William Hamilton, who discovered an important law of mathematics while walking with his wife. In this case, he had been previously thinking of the missing link in his chain of reasoning, and the problem was worked out for him by the subconscious plane of his intellect. On the same page, and the one following, is found the case of Dr. Thompson, who gives an interesting account of the workings of this part of his mind, which caused him at times to experience a feeling of the uselessness of all voluntary effort, coupled with the feeling that the matter was working itself clear in his mind. He tells us that at times he seemed to be merely a passive instrument in the hands of some person other than himself, who compelled him to wait until the work was performed for him by some hidden region of the mind. When the subconscious part of the mind had completed its work, it would flash the message to his conscious mind, and he would begin to write. On page 178, mention is also made of the great French chemist Berthelot, who relates that some of his best conceptions have flashed upon him as from the clear sky. In fact, the 8th lesson is largely made up of examples of this kind, and we ask the student to reread the same, in order to refresh his mind with the truth of the workings of the subconscious mentality. But you will notice in nearly all of the cases mentioned that those who related instances of the help of the subconscious mind had merely stumbled upon the fact that there was a part of the mind below consciousness that could and would work out problems for one if it could somehow be set in operation. And these people trusted to luck to start that part of the mind in operation. Or rather, they would saturate their conscious mind with a mass of material, like stuffing the stomach with food, and then bid the subconscious mind assort, separate, arrange, and digest the mental food, just as does the stomach and digestive apparatus digest the natural food, outside of the realm of consciousness or volition. In none of the cases mentioned was the subconscious mind directed specifically to perform its wonderful work. It was simply hoped that it might digest the mental material with which it had been stuffed in pure self-defense. But there is a much better way, and we intend to tell you about it. The Hindu yogis, or rather those who instruct their pupils in Raja Yoga, give their students directions whereby they may direct their subconscious minds to perform mental tasks for them, just as one may direct another to perform a task. They teach them the methods whereby, after having accumulated the necessary materials, they may bid the subconscious mentality to sort it out, rearrange, analyze, and build up from it some bit of desired knowledge. More than this, they instruct their pupils to direct and order the subconscious mentality to search out and report to them certain information to be found only within the mind itself, some question of philosophy or metaphysics, and when such art has been acquired, the student or yogi rests assured that the desired result will be forthcoming in due time, and consequently dismisses the matter from his conscious mind, and busies himself with other matters, knowing that day and night, incessantly, the subconsciousing process is going on, and that the subconscious mind is actively at work collecting the information, or working out the problem. You will see at once the great superiority of this method over the old hit or miss, hope it will work plan pursued by those who have stumbled upon bits of the truth. The yogi teacher begins by impressing upon his students the fact that the mind is capable of extending outward toward an object, material or mental, and by examining it by methods inherent in itself, extracting knowledge regarding the object named. This is not a startling truth because it is so common, everyone employing it more or less every day. But the process by which the knowledge is extracted is most wonderful, and really is performed below the plane of consciousness, the work of the conscious mind being chiefly concerned in holding the attention upon the object. We have spoken of the importance of attention in previous lessons, which it will be well for you to reread at this time. When the student is fully impressed with the details of the process of attention, and the subsequent unfoldment of knowledge, the yogi proceeds to inform him that there are other means of obtaining knowledge about an object, by the employment of which the attention may be firmly directed toward the object, and then afterwards held there, unconsciously, that is, a portion of the attention, or a subconscious phase of mentation, which will hold the subconscious mind firmly upon the work until accomplished, leaving the conscious attention and mentality free to employ itself with other things. The yogis teach the students that this new form of attention is far more intense and powerful than is the conscious attention, for it cannot be disturbed or shaken or distracted from its object, and that it will work away at its task for days, months, years, or a lifetime if necessary, according to the difficulty of the task, and in fact carries its work over from one life to another, unless recalled by the will. They teach the student that in everyone's life there is going on a greater or less degree of this subconscious work, carried on in obedience to a strong desire for knowledge manifested in some former life, and bearing fruit only in the present existence. Many important discoveries have been made in obedience to this law, but it is not of this phase of the matter that we wish to speak in this lesson. The yogi theory is that the subconscious intellectual faculty may be set to work under the directions of orders given by the will. All of you know how the subconscious mentality will take up an order of the will, or a strong wish, that the person be awakened at a certain hour in order to catch a train, or in the same way how the remembrance of a certain engagement at, say, 4 o'clock will flash into the mind when the hands of the clock approach the started hour. Nearly everyone can recall instances of this sort in his own experiences. But the yogis go much further than this. They claim that any and all faculties of the mind may be set going or working on any problem if ordered thereto by the will. In fact, the yogis and their advanced students have mastered this art to such a surprising extent that they find it unnecessary to do the drudgery of thinking in the conscious field, and prefer to relegate such mental work to the subconscious, reserving their conscious work for the consideration of digested information and thought presented to them by the subconscious mind. Their directions to their students cover a great deal of ground and extend over a long period of time, and many of the directions are quite complicated and full of detail, but we think that we can give our students an abbreviated and condensed idea in a few pages of the lesson. and the remaining lessons of the course will also throw additional light on the subject of subconscious mental action in connection with other subjects. The yogi takes the student when the latter is much bothered by a consideration of some knotty and perplexing philosophical subject. He bids the student relax every muscle, take the tension from every nerve, throw aside all mental strain, and then wait a few moments. Then the student is instructed to grasp the subject which he has had before his mind firmly and fixedly before his mental vision, by means of concentration. Then he is instructed to pass it on to the subconscious mentality by an effort of the will, which effort is aided by forming a mental picture of the subject as a material substance or bundle of thought, which is being bodily lifted up and dropped down a mental hatchway or trap door, in which it sinks from sight. The student is then instructed to say to the subconscious mentality, "I wish this subject thoroughly analyzed, arranged, classified, and whatever else is desired, and then the results handed back to me. Attend to this." The student is taught to speak to the subconscious mentality just as if it were a separate entity of being, which had been employed to do the work. He is also taught that confident expectation is an important part of the process, and that the degree of success depends upon the degree of this confident expectation. In obstinate cases, the student is taught to use the imagination freely until he is able to make a mental image or picture of the subconscious mind doing what is required of it. This process clears away a mental path for the feet of the subconscious mind, which it will choose thereafter, as it prefers to follow the line of least resistance. Of course, much depends upon practice. Practice makes perfect, in everything else, and subconsciousing is no exception to the rule. The student gradually acquires a proficiency in the art of subconsciousing, and thereafter devotes his time to acquiring new facts for mental digestion, rather than bestowing it upon the mechanical act of thinking. But a very important point to be remembered is that the willpower back of the transferred thought material, which willpower is the cause of the subconscious action, depends very greatly upon the attention and interest given to the acquired material. This mass of thought material, which is to be digested and threshed out by the subconscious mind, must be well saturated with interest and attention in order to obtain the best results. In fact, interest and attention are such important aids to the will that any consideration of the development and acquirement of willpower is practically a development and acquirement of attention and interest. The student is referred to previous lessons in this course in which the importance of interest and attention is explained and described. In acquiring the mass of thought material which is to be passed on to the subconscious digestion, one must concentrate a great degree of interest and attention upon each item of thought material gathered up. The gathering of this thought material is a matter of the greatest importance and must not be lightly passed by. One cannot hastily gather together all sorts of thought material and then expect the subconscious mind to do its work properly. It will not. In fact, and the student proceeding upon any such erroneous supposition is doomed to disappointment. The proper way to proceed is to take up each bit of thought material in turn and examine it with the greatest possible interest and consequently the greatest attention, and then, after having fairly saturated it with this interested attention, place it with the pile of material which after a while is to be passed on to the subconscious mentality. Then take up the next bit of material, and after giving it similar treatment, pass it along to the pile also. Then after a while, when you have gathered up the main facts of the case, proceed to consider the mass as a whole with interest and attention, giving it, as it were, a general treatment. Then drop it down the trap door into the subconscious mind with a strong command. Attend to this thought material, coupled with a strong expectant belief that your order will be obeyed. The idea underlying this treatment of the thought material with interest and attention is that by so doing a strong mental image is created, which may be easily handled by the subconscious mind. Remember that you are passing on thoughts for the subconsciousness to act upon, and that the more tangible and real these thoughts are, the better can they be handled. Therefore, any plan that will build these thoughts up into real things is the plan to pursue, and attention and interest produce just this result. If we may be pardoned for using a homely and commonplace illustration, we would say that the idea may be grasped by the illustration of boiling an egg, whereby the fluid white and yolk become solid and real. Also, the use of a shaving brush by a man, by which the thin lather is gradually worked up into a rich, thick, creamy mass, is an illustration. Again, the churning of butter is a favorite illustration of the Hindus, who thus call the attention of their students to the fact that thought material, if worked upon with attention and interest, becomes thought forms that may be handled by the mind just as the hands handle a material object. We ask you to think of these illustrations, for when you once grasp the idea that we wish to convey to you, you will have the secret of great thinking powers within your grasp. And this power of subconsciousing is not confined alone to the consideration of philosophical questions. On the contrary, it is applicable to every field of human thought and may be properly employed in any and all of them. It is useful in solving the problems of everyday life and work, as well as to the higher flights of the human mind. And we wish every one of our students to realize that in this simple lesson we are giving them the key to a great mental power. To realize just what we are offering to you, we would remind you of the old fairy tales of all races, in which there is to be found one or more tales telling of some poor cobbler or tailor or carpenter, as the case may be, who had by his good deeds gained favor with the brownies or good fairies, who would come each night when the man and his family were asleep, and proceed to complete the work that the artisan had laid out for the morrow. The pieces of leather would be made into shoes, the cloth would be sewed into garments, the wood would be joined and nailed together into boxes, chairs, benches, and what not. But in each case the rough materials were prepared by the artisan himself during the day. Well, that is just what we are trying to introduce to you. A clan of mental brownies, loving and kindly disposed toward you, who are anxious and willing to help you in your work. All you have to do is give them the proper materials and tell them what you want done, and they will do the rest. But these mental brownies are a part of your own mentality, remember, and no alien and foreign entities, as some have imagined. A number of people who have accidentally discovered this power of the subconscious mind to work out problems, and to render other valuable service to its owner, have been led to suppose that the aid really came from some other entity or intelligence. Some have thought that the messages came from friends in the spirit land, and others have believed that some high intelligence, God or his angels, was working in their behalf. Without discussing spirit communication or divine messages, in both of which we believe, with certain provisional reservations, we feel justified in saying that the majority of cases of this kind may be referred to the subconscious working of one's own mentality. End of the 10th lesson, Part 1. Recording by Arabella Grayson.